Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Manufacturing IT podcast. I'm joined today by Gilad Langer, who's the industry practice lead at Tulip Interfaces. Welcome, Gilad.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Dan.
Oh, my pleasure. And I was really appreciative when you said you'd come back and be on the pod, Gilad. So I know someone you're very high reputation in the industry. So maybe you could start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So, as I mentioned before, this is, the point we're in the industry is something that's very close to heart for me because, in fact, I started my career in academia back in the 90s working on research projects that were really the archetype or the fundament of what we call Industry 4.0. So things like IIoT, digital twin. We didn't really call them that. We had these very long abbreviations and acronyms because we were academic. And since then, I left academia in the 90s and went to work for industry and worked in a number of different roles, mostly in what we would call the manufacturing system space, touched many of the systems that we know today. And then, a few years ago, I realized that everything that we were talking about is becoming reality with Industry 4.0. So I stepped back into and took roles mostly with startups to try and bring this to the industry. Currently, I'm working at Tulip, and Tulip is, I would say, at the forefront of what is Industry 4.0. I also spent quite a lot of years in the life sciences industry, so I'm very, very much also part of Pharma 4.0, actively working on some of the Pharma 4.0 initiatives.
Okay, really interesting background then, because a lot of people start maybe in manufacturing and learn through Industry 4.0, etc. But to start in academia is a really interesting starting point for you. So I know Tulip a little bit from what I've seen and the disruptive nature of the business. So maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of an overview as well into Tulip.
Yeah, I mean, so in general, the short description, Tulip is a no-code platform that enables you to digitize and instrument your manufacturing processes, and with that, it's a digital way to support all the logistics and production control and continuous improvement and operational excellence initiative that you have in a typical manufacturing type of environment. But really, I think it brings around two very important things that are part of digital transformation. So we talk about digital transformation. Everybody thinks about technology, but technology is really just an enabler, and you can argue that it has been an enabler also in Industry 3.0. Plenty of systems and automation that we use there. But what it does is it makes the use of technology and software so simple. Now it becomes everybody's domain. It democratizes the ability to digitize the shop floor. So process engineers who typically work in Excel and Word and other type of even more advanced programs now have the ability to create software to enable their operators to do things better, capture more data, improve quality, et cetera.
It's a really interesting space. And I guess from my background, Gilad, is recruiting maybe traditional MES platforms, that, monolithic systems, the on-prem systems. And I guess what companies like Tulip are doing are quite exciting to see: modular, no code, low code. So, yeah, it's great to see the kind of industry evolving as Industry 4.0 evolves as well.
Yes. And again, we have to think about it. It really isn't more than an evolution at this point. This is a paradigm change. I wouldn't call it a revolution because it's not driven that way. But we've come to what some people call an inflection point, where something in the industry as a whole is changing direction or changing at a rate that is more than 10x what's going on. And it is at the core of what industrial revolutions are. Throughout the history, these industrial revolutions, when they came through, they brought with them an order of magnitude productivity increase. And that's what people are after. It's not the technology. Really, if you talk to executives, why are this interest, if you will, and it goes all the way up to the World Economic Forum. And you think, why would a World Economic Forum be so interested in Industry 4.0? It's because of that productivity, that order of magnitude productivity gain, which means financially also has implications. And that's what the executives are after. So I use that as a measure of, when you say, is this technology truly Industry 4.0 technology? Really, the question you should ask is, can it bring about an order of magnitude productivity gain in my factory, in my line? If it can't, it's not Industry 4.0, regardless of how many buzzwords the technology comes with.
Wow. I mean, that's a really interesting perspective. And I that's not something I've heard before. So I guess that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that on that front. I guess kind of where my train of thought was going with asking you, Gilad, is that, your industry practice lead. Maybe firstly, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. Well, I do a number of things with Tulip. So industry practice lead is really it's a new technology, it's a new paradigm. People are not just going to wake up one day and adopt this. It's not. You can't throw an iPhone if you use flip phone all your life and you throw an iPhone at you. It's like you need a bit of guidance in it, because again, why would you use an iPhone? It's completely different. Again, order of magnitude productivity, order of magnitude different way. They think about, once you know how to use an iPhone and you think about flip phones, like just writing a text. The ability to write a text or transcribe a text is so much different and gives you so much more value, right? So industry practice really is the collection of all the expertise that we have with the company, both experience with the industry, but also expertise with this. And we bring this to our customers because we understand this is a paradigm shift, and nobody's going to go, oh yes, I'm going to throw everything out that I have and put this new stuff because it is. So that's really what it is. It's a change agent. It's a way to bring this to the industry, but also, also bring in industry knowledge back into the company. How do we bring, because things like lean and production control and how you run a factory and how you do sampling and all the other stuff that goes in, that's not going to go away. These are practices that, regardless of technology, you need when you run a factory. So that needs to be brought back into the company as well.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I guess a big part of any business at the moment is educating the customer and making sure they're understanding the steps needed to digitally transform. But again, where does that line cross from someone like yourself then, between listening to the customer and understanding what they want and what they think and what their journey they're on, versus you bring in new technology or disruptive technology to them? Where is that middle ground?
So it's any of these type of changes that come about, they don't happen discreetly. It's not like one day I wake up and I'm all transformed. It's a process, and it takes time. And you can. I usually just like people, when you do traditional product management, you go to the customer and say, "Okay, Mr. Customer, what do you want?" And and then you go back and say, "Oh, we'll build this into the product." Now that works pretty good for retail, because you observe somebody on how he, shops for shoes.
Yes. Right.
And that's not going to change a lot. But manufacturing is a bit more complicated, right? I mean, if you take a look at any manufacturing plant, there's people that have at least a 4-year degree in something. It takes some time to understand how to run a plant. It's not buying shoes, right? So, it's a bit, the complexity is much more there. And therefore, so then at the same time, you can't go to a plant that is even, I would say, advanced and say, hey, what do you want of this new technology if they've never seen it before? And I equate it to, it's like, if you go to some remote village in I don't know, the Amazons, and you bring with you, do you know what a Yugo is? The Yugo car, it's a Fiat, like Levy and Fiat ones. And you bring that to them and say, hey guys, this is the best car in the world. Of course they'll say yes. They've never seen a car before, right?
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that's what fits them, et cetera. So you have to have, and that's essentially what we do, is like I say, okay, guys, we understand that you're running your plant, but the scenario. So what if we could, bring this technology and it could do this for you? And that's kind of an eye opener. Oh, okay, we haven't thought about that way. And then we start the discussion there.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess maybe that feeds on to my next question. And maybe, I know you spent extensive time within, pharma, biotech, regulated manufacturing, but do you see a different industry shift between which industries are maybe a little bit open to change and open to adopting some of the Industry 4.0?
Yes, of course. And this, this is the age-old adage that in order to have change, you need a crisis for change.
Yes.
Right? Now, there's plenty of examples of that. So industries that are doing well, and I equate the crisis to profit margins, right? So industries that are doing well with heavy profit margins, they naturally will not have a hard time with change.
Yeah.
So what we see is that actually industries where the profit margins are low, they are actually much opener and adopting change at a faster rate than industries where. So let's take life sciences. Even within life sciences, we went through the pandemic and they're making good profits right now. And so and it's funny because they are at the bleeding edge of finding new therapies and new ways to treat things. But when you say, hey, let's put in some new technologies in your manufacturing plant, they go, no, we're doing well, thank you. And if you go to a producer of antibiotics in a third world country where there's heavy competitive pressure, they're very open to change. Yes. And I think you see that across. So food and beverage, where profit margins are very, very thin, CPG, some assembly and traditional, like retail assembly, that's electronic assembly, they're open to that because they have, their profit margins are low in the heavy competitive space. So that's, industry where they're highly automated, for example, semiconductor, there's more resistance there to change. So It really depends on the industry. It's not necessarily, you have to look at it from a kind of a profit margin, competitive pressure type of scenario where the crisis is.
Yeah, no, again, I guess that makes sense. So I guess in some respects, it's almost counterintuitive as well, doesn't it? The whole things are going well, so we don't need to change. That's I'm sure that's what the automotive manufacturers thought as well for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was a crisis there for sure, and there's many examples of that, right?
Yeah.
In the third industrial revolution that came about, and I would equate that it's a combination of the lean movement together with the advent of the PLC. The American car industry was in crisis. They were getting beat by the Japanese, and they had to change. So the semiconductor went through the same cycle in 2001. It's one of the most advanced, highly automated industry in the world and lean industries in the world right now. But that was a crisis that caused that.
It's an interesting one when you take that step back and look at the bigger picture, as you say, from the crisis and those companies that are on that curve versus maybe not. My next question was going to be around maybe some of the common challenges that you face. So someone like yourself and kind of educating the customer, but also kind of relaying a little bit of some of the adoption that they want to have. Is there a common thread and theme on the kind of challenges that manufacturers are having that you're seeing?
Yes, there is for sure. And there's also industry, there's an industry perspective to that. So there's this, I'm going to try and generalize. The whole notion of democratization is a bit is hard for them to grasp. It's intuitive in a way, but there's we're so set in our ways and the way we operate with integrators, etc. If you want to put a new machine in, you call your supplier and your integrator, and they come in, they put it turnkey and go on, right? If you need to change something, you have to go back to your supplier to change it for you. Now comes this notion of, well, you don't have to. You can actually build these automations yourself. That's surprising, and then so there's a bit of a mindset shift there as it comes around. Paper is still pretty prevalent, and that the transformation of paper to digital is still problematic. It was problematic in the Industry 3.0. People have to get their heads out of the paper or out of the Excel sheet. I think that's pretty relevant from that perspective. But the other things is the things like augmented reality, the use of vision cameras. I think sometimes I get even surprised by the fact that people just the fact that they think it's so expensive. So you would say, well, why don't we put a sensor on the line and a camera to look at something? And the immediate reaction is, well, wait, $3,000-$4,000. We need to go buy something again. No, you can go on Amazon. It's $60, and a sensor I think is $13.
Okay, wow.
And there's a bit of like, well, no, but that's not industrial grade. Yes, it is actually. You can use it, right? And it's a mind. There's a whole mindset shift that goes around. How easy it is. At the bottom is how easy and to do things, but it's also a very, very easy way to prove value. It's like that's order of magnitude productivity gain. The fact that it's order of magnitude cheaper and order of magnitude faster to get to the point where you can get value. That's the order of magnitude gain. That's what we're looking for. So that's a way to check if technology truly is Industry 4.0.
I mean, that's a really interesting one. And I guess, most companies would assume that you're going to charge, as you say, $5,000-6,000 for a sensor or a camera. And when you highlight for such a small amount, you can really start to see, some return on value. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. We talk about sorry, go ahead.
I'd say I just want to bring another example. When if you recall SCADA systems, when they came around, and this I'm talking, the Wonderwares of the world, that story, they kind of a similar to this. They put these industrial systems on Windows computers, which were cheap at the time. Before that, you had to have dedicated systems and advanced system. And there was kind of the same scenarios. Like you cannot put an industrial system on a cheap computer, right? That was the what they were.
Accepted wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I guess that makes a lot of sense. And I guess sometimes, we do associate cost with value, don't we? So we naturally fall into that pattern. One of the things that you mentioned is the order of change magnitude. That makes a lot of sense. And I've not really thought about that much before. But when you speak to customers, is that a really easy way to identify whether that business is primed for digital transformation or whether they've got the right change mindset, whether they understand that?
No, I mean, there's a personal, there also, people matter, right? Of course. And that's what we say, the human. But, when you look at how Toyota talks about change, they classify the groups into distinct groups as the early adopters, which we all know. Those are the people that love technology and are going to this, and they're going to bring it into the mainstream, which is the people that are going to adopt the technology, but they're just kind of in the middle, and there's the majority. Of course, then on the other side, there's what they call in the lean speak, they call it concrete heads. People are never going to get it. Yeah. So really, you have to understand that mechanism. You have to understand who you're talking to, right? You need to identify your champion and your change agent, the ones that are going to carry it. And then there's this notion of bottoms up versus top down. One of the things that characterizes these new technologies is that they are kind of grassroots, bottoms up types of things. That a process engineer takes something, quickly shows value, loves it. He's your champion. He brings it up to the mainstream, but then you get this top-down motion. Okay, this is technology. This is IT. You get the corporate people coming down and saying, "Can we really use it? Does it fit our architect, our infrastructure? Would it really show value at scale?" And you really need to manage both of those if you want to get into a company and be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? To really kind of identify those different criterias where you maybe score a customer of whether they're ready for that change and how efficient they'll be at adopting that change. Because, the saying is you can only lead a horse to water. And if that mindset isn't changed, you can include all of the tech that you want. But if the operators, the people using it, are not ready for that change or are not educated on the benefits of that change, you're not going to see return.
Exactly, and that's what you were after. So the best, nobody can argue when you show success or show value. We see a lot of people picking up a process engineer, finding a technology, finding Tulip, doing a little pilot, a little app that shows some level of improvement. Maybe he can defect tracks a few things and shows some correlation. It goes up to supervisor manager, and once you get there, and the manager can see, well, this guy spent very, I didn't have to pay anything yet, right? Because you free trial, or maybe you paid for some, for some small subscription, and he showed value quickly. You can argue with that. And that's what you're looking for, right? You need to come back and say, somebody did something and it showed value. That is what works in manufacturing. We can't get away from it. Manufacturing is all about improvement and optimization And that's the name of the game. And if you don't show that, then you're dead in the water. And that's where traditional technologies have failed, because they could not very quickly show value. You had to do a top-down approach. You had to put all the system in. You had to show, you had to go through the whole the whole ROI and capital expenditure process and show that you're going to do it. Then you have to wait years until you can come back, and at that time, not necessarily show value. The fact that you can, that's why it fits lean, right? Lean is all about that. Walk in the plant, do your Gemba walk, identify opportunity, change it, show value, build on momentum. The new digital technologies align to that methodology, and that's why they can be successful. And if they don't align, again, it's another way to check. If they don't align to that methodology, well, then you really have to question whether this is truly a game changer.
It's really interesting. And I think for me, one of the real things that I keep hearing is that time to value or speed to value, because it's so important these days to have that acceptance of whether this investment is actually going to return something, rather than wait 18 months, 24 months for a monolithic system to be installed, implemented, up and running. Can you get that quick return and get the buy-in?
Right. Sorry to
speak over you there, Gilad. So,
no problem.
What I was going to say also, the natural shift as well is where the population is shifting. You've gone 25 years in your career where you started before, when these buzzwords now weren't buzzwords, they were long academic words. So what are you seeing now in terms of the workforce that you're working with? Is there a mindset shift, a culture shift to adapt to latest technologies?
Yes, for sure. I mean, everybody talks about workforce 4.0, the fact that the young people are digitally native, they expect, some of these technologies. That's not, I think that the problem is the young people have not made it all the way, if you will, to management. Some have, and there's a transition, of course, and much depends on the company that you're working dealing with. And I think the bigger risk right now is that this young workforce, as they come to these plants and start looking at how things are done, and they're meeting these archaic systems that first of all, they don't even know how to use them. And then they get, they get told to, like, you have no choice, you have to do that. So it stifles innovation. The fact that you have these older technologies that you have to adapt to stifles innovation, and people very quickly get into this manner of like, okay, I'm going to work with this ERP that is archaic, and I have to do all these weird things to get stuff. And then within the six months that they're used to doing this, and they get stuck, they're basically getting into the groove. They're stuck in that big hole, and they have then hard time to leave to get out of it.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge I see is that, yes, coming into technology, that's the sexy world to enter for a lot of people entering the workforce. But, being on the manufacturing side, the shop floor, the dirtier side of the business, having that experience is so critical. But how do you get people away from, sitting with the cool iPad to then being on the dirty, concreted floor of the business?
Well, the question is, do you have to? I mean, I think that's the problem. The fact that you're telling them, no, leave the iPad outside and come to the floor. I have, this is a story that I typically tell. It's based on a real life scenario, but not to this extreme. But you have a plant manager, right, that drives into his plant with his Tesla, parks it, charges it, right, it's connected to his phone and his watch and the wearables and all that. And he walks into his office, and it's all gadgety. And then you walk up to him and say, well, why don't we put some of this technology on your shop floor? He goes, no, that's untested. They don't, they're afraid to put it on. And why, if you ask, is because that's not what he's measured on. He's not measured on the gadgetry. He's measured on the plant, whatever it is, adhering to schedule, keeping the volumes up, making sure that he can produce the quality. And if you put a gadget in there and they go, how is that going to impact that? Is it going to bring me so much more quality that I'm going to take the risk to put in something that is maybe, I'm not sure about? And that's the issue. So if you can prove it, and that's what I'm saying is like, we don't need to we don't need to transform the whole plant to be like Tesla-like. Sure. We can just start somewhere small and show that it does work. And then we can go from there. That's low risk, rapid time to value, and that's what plant managers want.
I guess that makes a lot of sense, and I can really envisage that. And I guess you're going to have that, aren't you, where some people in there, maybe other areas of life, happy to adopt technology, happy to accept that it works, de-risk, but then when it comes to their shop floor, maybe be a little bit nervous. No, that makes a lot of sense. So one of my questions next, Gilad, was going to be, so I guess you've been in that really nice part of the world where you've worked with the technology companies, but then you've also been a consultant and you've led engagements and stuff. So with so many companies offering digital solutions, digital transformation, Industry 4.0 solutions, blah, 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 how can a company, a manufacturer, identify the right partner? What nuggets can you share with the audience who might be sitting there at the manufacturer side thinking, how do we see the wood from the trees with all of these companies selling Industry 4.0?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really hard. So, I call it the, of course, when these technologies come about, there's huge opportunity. And with huge opportunity, a lot of startups, a lot of people trying different things. And as you said, how do we read it? So it's like springtime. Well, I live in California, so in spring, we have like at spring, all the flowers are up, like it's everything is coming out, everything is green. How do you pick the right seeds? How do you this? It's really hard, and there's without a doubt. There's a few things I think at a high level that you have to think about. First of all, these are emerging technologies, so this notion of trying to find something that is true and tested, forget about it. Okay. I actually have to think about it in the way that I want to test and try as much of this new technology as possible. So what you need to do is in the company, establish a way where you can continuously evaluate these technologies, whether they're going to bring you value or not. And not just go, oh, we're going to go and again, this, top down. Oh, Industry 4.0, we'll do an Industry 4.0 roadmap. These are the technologies we're going to, go with, but it changes so fast that as soon as you put that roadmap together, it's already obsolete. It's already legacy, because you haven't even encountered some of the technologies that are maybe coming down, improvements that your existing technology vendors are going to have. So it needs to be a process of continuous evaluation of these new technologies and how they fit and how you can bring value. That's one. The other is that there are some. I mentioned a few of them, some very simple rules that you can put in place in terms of evaluating whether these truly are going to be beneficial. And the first of all is this notion of bottoms up and value. You need to be able to show value very quick, right? In a specific area. Like go do a Gemba walk, find a place where there's a problem, and say, okay, all of these technologies that I'm evaluating, which will be a good fit for this, evaluate them, see if they bring value very quickly. If they have this ability to align with your lean process or this continuous improvement process. Then there's two other things that I usually use to classify whether. The first one is democratization. Does this technology bring around democratization? Does it make, can a process engineer, quality engineer, supervisor, operator use this technology out of the box? Think about an app in your iPhone. Like my analogy I have with my kids. They first of all, they have multiple apps, and you probably also do, multiple apps to do the same thing. You don't have to have one, you can have many. And how do they check if it works? They'll download it from the store, app, Play Store, whatever, Play or app, whatever you're using. If they can't learn how to use it within the first 30 seconds and it brings them value, it's out.
It's a good point.
Right? It's the same process. Like you need to be able to use this, understand it, etc. You can't just you need a week of training. That doesn't work. So that's democratization is. The other one is this notion of bottoms up. You need to be able to use that technology isolated in a little place of your plant. If they come back and say, no, we need to install the system, you need to create all this master data, we need to connect to ERP and bring data down, otherwise we can't configure it properly. That's not bottoms up type of technology. Simple rules like that will help you weed it down to really some of this, and of course the use case itself, right? If you want to help the operator to do the right work instruction type, that's a different thing than capturing data about the performance of the machine versus capturing data around are we executing to adhering to schedule and other things. So it needs to fit all these different use cases.
I think those are really good nuggets of wisdom, Gilad. So thanks for sharing those. And I think those will be really beneficial to companies trying to identify the right partner from, I don't know, the cowboy.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think there's a lot of rebranding. That's kind of what you have to watch out. Again, everybody's trying to ride the wave of Industry 4.0. Yes. You can take your Yugo and put one of these kits on them, and it looks like a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of scratch the paint to see that truly it isn't, right?
No, I think that's a fair comment. And I guess maybe this leads on to my next kind of question. One of the things I keep hearing, I mean, what I've seen the last couple of years, and probably you're the same on LinkedIn especially, is the rise of these Industry 4.0 influencers, these manufacturing influencers. And one of the things that I keep hearing is that manufacturers, they need to become data companies. They need to harness their data. They need to harness their insights. So naturally, there's this natural kind of conversation now about how do companies harness their new data? Where do they start? Which data is important to harness? What are your thoughts on that whole kind of data companies, manufacturing, etc.?
Yeah, so that comes from the core of Industry 4.0. So the Industry 4.0, as it was framed up in Germany, framed up these the maturity scale, right? The 6 stages of maturity scale. And if you really read through that, you will see that it has to do with being able to gain insights from your data. So capturing data in a way that you can create, but that's only one dimension, right? So the data is one dimension. The other dimension is this human centricity and this bottoms up. It's not enough just to capture data. You also have to bring in the human. If you take a look at digital technology, outside of manufacturing, the example I usually bring is Uber and Lyft, which I'm sure everybody knows, right? Why, what is Uber and Lyft? If you ask the question, Uber and Lyft, by the way, and many more. I think there's now and there's many different variants of it, right? Essentially, it's a taxi service. Under the hood, it's a taxi service, right? So what's different? So comparable to manufacturing, you have a line that produces something. That's the taxi service, right? It doesn't change. It needs to do that, right? The difference is 2 things, and then I'll bring back to this. First of all, it's democratized. Why is it democratized? Everybody can be a taxi service provider, and everybody can be a taxi service consumer. So it democratized the taxi service. And how did it do that? Well, first of all, it makes it easier for humans to consume the service, both provide and consume the service. If I want to be a taxi service provider, I need to get an app. I need to fill out a questionnaire. They do some checks and off you go. And you need a car, by the way. Okay. And sometimes they'll even provide the car for you, but they'll actually lease the car for you. But that's from a provider perspective, from a consumer perspective, I just need an iPhone a smartphone, right? And then they go, okay, so that's the human part of it. It's not enough just to have data. Of course, the data comes in because guess what? How do they find how to dispatch a taxi to you? Well, they have all the data, the GPS data. They know this. They have algorithms that run it's not who's the closest. It's how fast can they get to you and your preferences as well. That's how they use the data, right? But the data means nothing without the context of the human who's going to consume it and the what we need to do with it. So, reading through this, we've been collecting data for the last 30, 40 years. We have, historians and systems and all this data. Can you use the data for something? No. So it has, you can't just say, oh, we have data. It's not enough.
It needs to be in a usable format where you can actually find the benefit of having that data.
You have to ask the why. What is it going to be used for in the context of the human who's going to consume and make decisions based on it, right? It's all about, again, it's all about performance. How can we, is the data going to give you an order of magnitude productivity gain?
Yeah.
Just having the data is not going to give you any productivity gain.
I think that's a really good conversation there, Gilad. Thanks so much for taking the time to share your insights. And I think what we've got there is a lot of nuggets of wisdom that hopefully the listenership can really benefit from. So I appreciate your participation. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure to get to express my views and share them very openly.
No, good stuff. Well, thanks, Gilad. Thank you.